everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Life After Kids with Doctors Brooke and Lynn. I'm Dr. Brooke.
And I'm Dr. Lynn.
And we're so glad you're here because today we are talking about books. Yes. One of my favorite topics, and I know one of yours. We spend a lot of time talking about these.
Yeah, and if you're not a reader, stay with us because we're going to talk about some ways that books are so meaningful for us and reading is helpful, but like bite-sized ways that you can fit it into your life, even if you're not somebody who would sit down and read a book from cover to cover.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing, about books, and I'm sure you know this if you're a reader, but if you're reading a fiction, my gosh, it can take you to other places and just be such a nice stress relief and life lessons in there, just open you up to new ideas. And then if you're reading nonfictions, man, the opportunity to learn and grow. And I think the nice thing about this phase of life, I remember when my kids were little, it was hard to find time to read. Yes. Because you were just always taking care of kids, although sometimes I'd be nursing and reading at the same time. But now, there is more time
to devote to that.
I
think when you're so busy as a young mom or young professional or whatever it is that you did in those years, you might want to, if you got a few free moments, maybe you'd sit down and turn on the TV.
Yes.
But now that we're finding ourselves with more free time, I watch less and less TV because it's more of a tune-out way, and I want to be active in my downtime.
Yeah.
And reading does that. And if you're not somebody who likes to read nonfiction, that is perfectly okay, because one of the things that I have found that has been so great when you talk about growth is historical fiction. It's been amazing for me to learn about, decades and just different events, and I love historical fiction.
Yeah, that's actually such a good point because you get the bonus of being entertained. They're sometimes easier to read, but you're learning some things.
Yeah.
I've learned, I remember reading The Kite Runner specifically. That pops into my mind. That's a hard book to read, but man, what I learned in that book, and that was a historical fiction.
Yeah, absolutely.
I recently read a book called The Paris Wife, and that was about Ernest Hemingway. It was it was a fiction as well, but learning about his life and his first wife and just things like that's so interesting. I love those types of books, so I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, Outlander comes to mind for me. That's, again, fiction based on a fictional couple, but the events back in, Scotland at the time in the 1800s were accurate, and so I learned so much about that time of year and that part of that world.
Yeah, that's great. And I like to, and I know you do too, and actually I think you taught me this, and you guys might find this odd, but because we're so intentional, I like to set a goal for the year, at the start of the year, how many books I want to read, just to be intentional about, and maybe that's, not more, you would look at that more for nonfiction, but I think you can look at that all the way around of just setting that goal so you don't find yourself sitting down on the couch and not stimulating your brain and just watching some easy TV.
Yeah, I do that as well because I like to learn from nonfiction.
Yeah.
So I make it a point to read a lot of books for personal development, self-help, what have you. So I keep a note on my phone and I keep all the titles and I get to check them off as an achiever. I like to do that.
That's great.
And I actually have learned that it's okay to pull back. So I used to try to read 24 books a year.
Wow.
In addition to some of the other coursework and things that I did, I found it was too much. And so now I set a very achievable, attainable goal of 12 books a year. And I find that I probably read a little bit more than that, but at least at the end of the year, I can look back. I look back at those titles that I've read, remember what it was that I learned. And there's usually one thing really pivotal that I take away that impacts how I'm living.
Yeah.
It's that important.
Well, and I think it's important here for you to mention that one of your top 5 strengths is learner. So for you, reading the nonfictions and constantly learning new things and new ideas just lights you up, right?
It does, yeah. And if you resonate with that, it's the same thing. So make sure you're finding opportunities for you to learn, and that usually easiest way for that is to come from a book. We can't always enroll in a class or coursework. And so a book can do that for us.
Sure, and I love the fact that you have been self-reflective and assessive on knowing okay, I'm going to set a goal, but I don't have to hold hard and fast, because if you do that sometimes, and this could be like this beyond books, you set a goal and then you end up in your mind, I just have to get that goal done, and you don't enjoy the process or enjoy the reading along the way because you're just trying to get to the next
I wasn't digesting it to where I could apply it. It's kind of like doing too much exercise. There gets to be a point where too much of
that
seems to be a theme, right? Too much of a good thing is still is too much.
And talk about, like, I don't do this as much, but I know you do, is like you're into the audiobooks, right? Talk about that. Like,
yeah, so I do it less now. I'm driving less because, like you guys, my daughter's driving herself, but I found myself, and if you're still in the car or you have a commute, music just doesn't, stimulate me in the car. So I put on a book, and I can digest an audiobook in like a couple of weeks.
Yeah, you get through them
just
quick.
On the rides only. Yeah. But I also like to have a book that I carry in my purse, and I don't sit down at home a lot to read. I know you like to read right before bed. I love that habit. I personally don't find that in my schedule. I haven't prioritized that in my schedule, but I keep a book in my purse for if I'm waiting in line, if I have to wait at a gas station for a pump or something. I'll just pull it out and read a few pages, and I just read 5 pages.
It's so good. And you think about that. Reading 5 pages even in a day is going to get you through a book. And here's the thing, we get back to this topic. We've talked about this in previous episodes of stacking. So what can you do on top of something that you're already doing? And in this case, if you've got to drive somewhere, or you're waiting in line for something, or you're at a doctor's appointment or some appointment, rather than popping on your phone and just scrolling, now you've got a book and you're using that time very beneficially. Yeah,
it's again having that intention to have a plan for when that spare time pops up. Otherwise, you just divert to entropy, and you're going to do the least the exercise that requires the least amount of work, which is scrolling. And we all know that too much of that. I mean, some of that's fine, but
it's not like you should never do it, but I'm just saying there's a balance, and this is a good way to be productive with your time.
And remember, I think we spoke about how we underestimate what we can accomplish in a year, but we overestimate what we can accomplish in a week. And we underestimate what we can do, and we can read a lot, and books can change our thinking, and that's what makes them so powerful. Awesome. And I love that quote, that you are the product of the people that you spend time with and the books that you read.
Oh, that's good. You are. That's so interesting. So it's important to be intentional about reading and exposing yourself to new ideas, and also intentional about what you pick and choose.
I think so, because I know that there's a lot of fiction out there that may be sort of like fluffier, and that's okay. A little bit of that is okay, but if you're finding that's all you're reading, look around, and just reflect on that and see if it's bringing you what it needs to bring.
Yes. Now, let's talk about that for a second, because I do love a fluff read and I love a beach read. But what I tend to do, we both in the summer, like if you guys haven't read Ellen Hildebrand, it's fluffy, it's easy, but the stories are great. I just love her, and I save her because it's one of those things where if you're doing it all the time, it's not as special, right? But I save her. I know when summer's coming, I'm going to spend my time reading her and authors like her. Just like a great, it's a stress reliever for me, is what it is. That it just calms my nervous system. I'm not worried about having to learn the thing. I'm just being entertained. In a positive way.
For me, it's a hallmark of summer. If I'm reading fiction, it means, hey, it's the good times. Like the weather's nice. We're at the water. We're near the water, and it's okay to just settle down and relax, And I'm, not being an achiever. I do struggle with that, but the summer and reading that book, that is the time that signals to me, like, it's okay. Like, chill out, read a
relax,
book.
And and frankly, for me, I've done a lot of nonfiction and development, health. I read a lot of health books, right? Because that's one of my core values. But I like to read the more fictional books at night before I go to bed. You mentioned that I like to read at night, but that's when I'm unwinding. That's when I want some stress relief. I'm not the person that's going to read the angst and the books about war and the books about murder mysteries. For me, especially at night, I don't want to get myself, I'm already in my head thinking about worse things. I don't need more of it in a book. I like to read the lighter things just as a way to relax and get ready for bed. I would save my nonfiction more for during the day, in the morning, maybe part of my morning routine. If I jump in the sauna, a great time to read my book. And I like to save the heavier books for audio. They're just easier for me to get through.
Agree. Yeah, it's a little bit like the fiction is just the treat. It's the reward at the end of your workout. And we've talked about that. And then the nonfiction is the thing that is good for you, that you make time to do consistently, because it does impact you and your thinking, and helps you to get to a place further than without.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Share, before we go, some of your favorites or books that you really like.
So recently I really enjoyed, I've got it right here. I really enjoyed this book. It's Ed Milet, The Power of One More. It's really well done, and it's just easy to digest, and really, I think, good for everybody. I also love she's an MD, her name is Christiane Northrup, and I loved this book. I read this a couple years back, but if you're a woman in mid-age, check this book out, because there's so much in here in terms of just health and radiance, vitality, and well-being.
Great. I love that. I love, oh gosh, I could go on. I talked about Ellen Hildebrand. I like, did you have that book there, The Compound Effect? That was a great book. We've both read that. It's a quick read, so powerful. I love a book that's like got a big impact on simple things. I thought that was one of those reads. There are so many books I've read about health. I mean, I could go on and on. Dr. Cole has written some good books, Ketotarian, Intuitive Fasting, if you're into like health type things. The Gap and Gain, that's a really good book to read. That's kind of more like a self-help. So those are some of mine. And then we always talk about The Road Back to You. That's a great Enneagram book.
Yeah, that is. I think there's, getting back to finishing a book or not finishing a book. I've never finished a book where I couldn't say there was one thing that I got out of there. And there's some that are better than others.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting to sort of like read a book at a different stage in your life and have it affect you for what's happening in your circumstance. I think that, you could read a book in your 20s or 30s and then read it today, and it could mean something totally different. So some of your favorite books, another tip is just to go back and reread them. Like if
they'll
they
affect
meant
you
a lot
differently.
to you. Exactly.
Absolutely. And I'll leave you with one more thing as we wrap up, because this is all about thriving in midlife. And there's a book by Shonda Rhimes, who is the producer of so many, Private Practice, Scandal. What was the one with McDreamy? Why is it escaping me?
Grey's Anatomy.
Grey's Anatomy, yes. She's amazing, but she wrote a book called A Year of Yes.
Yes.
And that, if you are in the mode where it's a really great book. And if you are in the mode of like, I'm going to live my best life and make each day count, that would be a really good, I'll leave you with that send off. That's a great book to check out.
She's a woman and somebody our
really
age
good.
as well. So.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, have a great week.
Happy reading.
Happy reading. Let us know what you're reading. We'd love to hear, because we're always looking for new books. And make sure you're following us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and www.lifeafterkids.com.
Have a great week.
Take care.